Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us here today. I'm Ross Murray at the Glad Media Institute, and you are here to listen to demonstrating company-wide allyship beyond pride rainbow washing. And it is very good and exciting to be with you here today. I hope this is going to be a helpful conversation starter. I'm going to give you a lot of information about what your company can do to demonstrate its allyship with the LGBTQ community, give you some pitfalls to avoid, and hopefully help you to steer your companies to be the best places, not just for employees, but also for customers and for the communities in which they live. So just to get started with a little bit of introduction, GLAD has been around for 36 years. We started in 1985 in response to defamatory coverage of the HIV and AIDS crisis that was coming out of New York City local newspapers, particularly the New York Post. And GLAD began as a protest movement against really harmful, damaging, and defamatory reporting that was blaming the victim, making fun of them, making light of the AIDS crisis. At the same time, another group that was beginning to do work in Hollywood on representation, both in front of and behind the camera as well. And over the last 36 years, GLAD has grown and changed and evolved. We've been a watchdog organization. We've been a partner organization. We've been a guide for media representation for LGBTQ people. And now we are working with newsrooms. We're working with studios and with networks. We're working with companies and corporations, and we are working with LGBTQ people, everyday LGBTQ people who find themselves in an instance or a situation that requires media attention, and working with LGBTQ organizations that want to expand and deepen their media impact so that they can get their stories, their news, their work, their advocacy out in the wider world, helping to accelerate acceptance for the entire LGBTQ community. We've been doing this for so long, and you see on the screen here just a sampler of some of the things that GLAD has been involved with over the course of the last 36 years. But I'm part of the GLAD Media Institute, and I want to talk a little bit about that as well, because the GLAD Media Institute is GLAD's education, training, research arm. We have been applying the best practices that GLAD has picked up over the course of the last 36 years and helping to apply that to educate people on how the media works and how to effectively get their story, their message across in the media. We're educating the media industry on how to best tell accurate, fair, and inclusive stories about the LGBTQ community. And we're working with companies and corporations like the ones where you are working, the ones that you're representing today, to help them to be allies, to help them to share and spread messages that are going to help accelerate that acceptance for the LGBTQ community. And that really is the purpose and point of this workshop, is what are those messages that we spread, and what are the ways that we can do that to maximize the impact as much as possible. My name's Ross Murray. I am a senior director at the GLAD Media Institute. My pronouns are he, him, his. If you want to follow me on social media, on Twitter and on Instagram, I'm at Inlay Terms. And I've been at GLAD now for 10 years. During that time, I have been the director of religion, faith, and values with a background in religion. You can see some of my side projects involve a lot of religion and faith work. I'm a consecrated Lutheran deacon with a calling to do LGBTQ advocacy. I've also, over time at GLAD, been the director of news, the director of the Southern Stories program, focusing on LGBTQ people living in the South, the director of the Global Voices program, helping to head up GLAD's international work and working with LGBTQ people and media companies and organizations all around the globe. And now that we have formed and created the GLAD Media Institute, I am heading up education and training, helping to bring knowledge and awareness and understanding and mindsets and real skills for how we can tell the story of the LGBTQ community and use our stories to advance equality and acceptance, legally and socially and otherwise. You can see I've got some side projects that exist outside of GLAD. I'm the founder and director of a program called the Naming Project, which is an LGBTQ youth ministry and summer camp. It is a passion of mine. I've been running it since 2003. I have written a book about LGBTQ inclusive youth ministry based on what we've learned over the last many, many years of running the Naming Project, called Made, Known, Loved, Developing LGBTQ Inclusive Youth Ministry. And most recently, I have become a producer on a podcast called Yes, Jesus, which is a comedy podcast exploring queer Christianity that stars the host Daniel Francesi and Azariah Southworth. And I know those things are not relevant to the workshop today, but want to give you a little bit of background on who I am, the passions that I have, the work that I do, the experience that I've been working with companies and corporations and media outlets for so long. And I'm hoping that over the course of the rest of this workshop and the rest of this conference, we can connect. So if anything that I've said so far has interest to you, please don't hesitate to reach out, to message. Follow me on social media. Find me during those social networking times of this conference. I would love to chat with you more about my work at GLAAD, the GLAAD Media Institute, or any of these side projects that I have outside of GLAAD. But now I'm going to turn us to our topic at hand. And I want to start us off with a quote that comes from GLAAD's president and CEO. This is something that she said to Richard Quest of CNN's Quest Means Business. And it was in 2019. It was when New York City was celebrating the 50th anniversary at the riots at the Stonewall Inn. And so people were saying the 50th, celebration of Pride. And everyone was there. The world descended, and everyone was connected and involved in some way, including a lot of companies and corporations who had floats, who had marketing campaigns, whose own employee resource groups, people like you, helped to gather together and create company-wide events and picnics and public displays. One of the things that Sarah Kate told Richard Quest was, you are not just marketing to a community. It's about joining a movement. And I think that's really important to keep in mind as we think about what our companies and our corporations and our places of work can do to help advance equality for the LGBTQ community. Not to make it just a safe place to work, but that your company becomes a positive influence within the communities and the states and the countries in which they operate. So we're going to spend time exploring that. But we can't talk about this without understanding what some of the current landscape is. And one of the things that GLAAD has been doing has been a report called Accelerating Acceptance. This is polling information and data where we ask non-LGBTQ people how they think and how they feel about the LGBTQ community. And in 2020, we asked some particular questions about what non-LGBTQ people know about the LGBTQ community. And what we found was incredibly striking and telling. According to the 2020 Accelerating Acceptance Report, 80% of non-LGBTQ people and 65% of LGBTQ people believe that it is currently illegal under US federal law to turn someone away from a restaurant or another place of business because they're LGBTQ. The reality is it's not. People think that we have protections from being turned away from a place of business. Even LGBTQ people believe this. But the reality is there is no federal law, and most states don't have a law. And it gets even more dire. That same report found that 89% of non-LGBTQ people and 78% of LGBTQ people believe it is currently illegal under US federal law to evict someone from their housing because they're LGBTQ. And there is no federal law. There are no federal protections that are going to protect people from being turned away from places of businesses, from being evicted from your home, simply for the reality of being LGBTQ. People think that this is a protection that exists when it in reality does not. And this is what gets me the most out of anything, is that people actually believe that it should be illegal under federal law in the United States. After asking about whether people believe those laws exist, we asked them if they believe those laws should exist. 91% of Americans, of non-LGBTQ Americans, believe that it should be illegal under US federal law to evict someone from their housing because they're LGBTQ. 90% believe it should be illegal to turn someone away from a restaurant or another place of business because they're LGBTQ. 89% believe that it should be illegal to deny renting or selling housing to someone because they're LGBTQ. And it goes on and on and on, denying employment benefits, banning physically qualified transgender people from serving in the US military, which was an incredibly hot topic in 2020, which thankfully we have somewhat resolved. Or denying transgender people the right to use the restroom that aligns with their gender identity. People believe that such acts of discrimination should be illegal, and they believe it so much, they think it actually already is illegal under US federal law. This is the education, the knowledge gap that we have to address. People have to know and understand that reality. And here's what's really important, to recognize that there is that opportunity, because there is federal legislation that could put these protections, put these laws in place. The laws that are highly supported by non-LGBTQ people, the laws people think already are in place. The Equality Act has been sitting in Congress. It's been bouncing around for years now. And what the Equality Act would do is amend the Civil Rights Act to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity in employment, housing, public accommodations, public education, federal funding, credit, and the jury system. And the Equality Act has been around for a while. It passed the House in 2019 in the last Congress and did not go anywhere in the Senate. In 2021, it's already passed the House again, and it's had a hearing in the Senate, but its future is really uncertain. It is not a done deal, despite the fact how much broad public bipartisan support exists. And there are political reasons for that. It may fall victim to the filibuster rules and may not be able to be passed without amending the filibuster. In 2019, the Equality Act had bipartisan support in the Senate. That bipartisan support has erased in 2021, probably due to a more polarized, closely divided Senate. And so despite the fact that Americans largely, including non-LGBTQ people, believe these protections should exist, we're not sure if this law is going to pass. This is where your company could be putting pressure and contacting your lawmakers to make sure that the Equality Act does pass federally, or that those same protections exist on a state or a local level. And this is also important to note because at the same time that we are talking about and pushing for this federal legislation, we have seen an increasing wave of anti-LGBTQ bills spread around the country. The map I'm putting up on the screen right now is from our friends at Freedom for All Americans. And this map shows how many anti-LGBTQ bills were introduced in states around the country in the 2021 legislative season. So you'll note Texas has introduced the absolute most. And while I'm recording this, Texas is in a special session still trying to pass some of those into law. But if you look closely, most states are at least some tinge of pink, meaning that there are really no states that are safe from anti-LGBTQ bills being introduced and filed. Now, whether they go somewhere or not has to do with the individual legislature, but many more of these bills passed into law than any of us would have liked. The most common one, and the one that you're most likely to have heard of, is one that would ban transgender students from participating in athletics in high school. These are laws that are designed to cut transgender youth off from their friends, their peers, their support, learning those skills and self-discipline and things that sports and extracurricular activities bring to us. Other bills that did pass into law, some allowed medical professionals to deny treatment to LGBTQ people. And in one particular law in Arkansas, a law banned doctors from providing treatment for transgender youth. We can expect that these laws are going to be reintroduced next year, again and again and again. This is where we need to speak up. And I'm hoping you're taking a look at this map, seeing your state, wanting to look up what bills got introduced, and understanding if there is a role or a place for you individually or for your company to stand up and say, we need more protections, not protections to be stripped away from LGBTQ people around the country. So why are we doing this? And why is this so pressing? This is happening in the face that Generation Z, this youngest generation, is identifying more and more with diverse sexual orientations and gender identities. In a Gallup poll released earlier this year, we've now seen that 15.9% of Generation Z is identifying as LGBT in some way, in some form. A few years ago, GLAAD did a survey that found that up to 20% of this youngest generation says they are not strictly heterosexual and not strictly cisgender. I think it's also really important to note that a quarter of LGBTQ youth are identifying as non-binary, with another 20% questioning whether they're non-binary or not. Which means we have nearly half of LGBTQ youth that are identifying using this term non-binary to describe themselves and expecting that the world is going to be able to handle that. And we have set up a system that is very binary in our legal system and our laws and our cultures. And I think that there's a real clash between the types of bills that we're seeing introduced in these state legislatures and the reality of our next generation of a workforce, our next generation of consumers, our next generation of public leaders. And this is the place for our companies to take a bold stance. The buying power of Gen Z is immense. They are increasingly queer. They've got trillions of dollars to spend. And you can see that their global buying power is at $3.7 trillion, with $1.7 trillion of that in the United States. And look at this bottom headline. Visibility is a business imperative. This is showing that people are more identifying as LGBTQ in this youngest generation. They are going to want to see themselves being represented in marketing, in leadership, in employment, in public life. And this is one of those areas that your company can be looking ahead of how to get ahead of the curve and be on the side of the LGBTQ community, especially with this youngest generation. Because this youngest generation of Gen Z wants brands who are going to stand up for the community. I put a couple graphics here on the screen for you to look at. The things that are driving brand loyalty for Gen Z as adults, right? Quality and price are things that people are always going to look for. But if you look further down this list, the brand's reputation, their social stances, their political stances, their ethical stances. These are things that Gen Z is taking into consideration for what brands they want to be loyal to. And a lot of them are cynical. A lot of us are cynical, right? We're skeptical that brands' motivations for Pride Month campaigns actually benefit the community. And so there is work to do for your company to demonstrate that the marketing campaign, that pride, beautiful pride, rainbowy thing, has an impact and makes a real difference on people's lives. And so how do you think beyond just the Pride campaign to how to show up throughout the rest of the year, both in the communities in trouble and how to celebrate with us? And so that's what I want to get into the rest of this. First, I'm going to start with marketing, with advertising and in media. GLAAD did a survey in 2020 with our friends at Procter & Gamble titled LGBTQ Inclusion in Advertising and Media. And I want to share some stats and figures with that, just so you can understand what role even just a marketing campaign can play in helping to bring about understanding and awareness for the LGBTQ community. So this first graph that I'm putting up here is showing this LGBTQ inclusive marketing impact. We wanted to demonstrate how many non-LGBTQ people personally knew someone who was LGBTQ. And unsurprisingly, this youngest generation is the most aware of both sexual orientations and gender identities. You'll always notice there's a gap between people being aware of diverse sexual orientations versus gender identities. That's one of those areas that we are continuing to see growth in. We also then asked, have you been exposed to LGBTQ people in either advertising or in television movies in the past 3 months? And got ourselves a baseline, noting that over half of non-LGBTQ people have seen LGBTQ people in advertising, and 70% have seen them in television or movies. And so we want to ask what kind of impact that being exposed to LGBTQ people has. First of all, in self-reporting, this is the percentage of non-LGBTQ people who have become more accepting of LGBTQ people over the last few years. And we'll notice that acceptance does continue to advance. But if you look closely, you can see that people that were exposed to media that includes LGBTQ people in the last 3 months report that they are more accepting to gay and lesbian people, bisexual people, non-binary people, transgender people. That marketing has an impact. It has people feel like they have become more accepting. And feeling like they become more accepting helps with those everyday interactions with LGBTQ people over time. This is an educational process that is going to let people understand the reality of our lives, decrease that anxiety, break down those stereotypes, and help people to live full lives. It has even bigger impact in everyday scenarios where we ask non-LGBTQ people who are comfortable in these personal situations, in everyday interactions with LGBTQ people. Learning that a family member is LGBTQ, seeing a same-sex couple holding hands, seeing a gay or lesbian coworker's wedding photo, having a new LGBTQ family with children moving into your neighborhood, starting a conversation with people whose sexual orientation is different than your own, or learning that your own doctor is gay or lesbian or bisexual. I skipped one. Starting a conversation with people whose gender is unclear to you. Finding that having been exposed to media with LGBTQ people inclusive is a marked jump in feeling more comfortable in these everyday interactions. Again, it decreases anxiety. It decreases the stereotypes. It helps people to learn folks for who they are and not just for what fears might exist around the reality of people. And this is helpful. This is instructive. This makes a difference because then it makes it harder to want to pass laws that are going to harm the community because now they actually know someone. It even decreases the confusion. I mentioned LGBTQ a lot. It's a long acronym. There are variations on it. The term has evolved over time. Media helps people to understand all those letters that exist in the acronym and all the communities that the LGBTQ plus community encompasses and represents. Again, confusion decreases by seeing media in the last 3 months. Confusion about all these different groups and what makes us unique and what ties us together helps a lot. This has a real educational impact and helps to make the lived lives of LGBTQ people so much easier and better. And I want to make one more case out of this survey, out of this study, because I've talked about how helpful and beneficial including LGBTQ people in advertising and in media is. And it's good for the community, but it is also good for the company. The people, non-LGBTQ people that see LGBTQ people in advertising, what's the sentiment that they feel about that company? People believe that the companies that include LGBTQ people in their ads are supportive of LGBTQ rights, committed to offering products and to all types of customers, value all kinds of diversity, treat all their employees with respect, understand that LGBTQ and other minority groups deserve recognition. They believe the company is socially responsible and leaders in business. And this is my favorite one. I feel better about buying products from them. Having 68% of your customers feeling better about being your customers because they see the inclusion happening in your advertising is good for you as a company, even as much as it helps the LGBTQ community advance and gain acceptance and understanding. So this is the imperatives. So now let's talk about how we do this. My first recommendation, reflect the full diversity of the LGBTQ community. And the LGBTQ community has a lot of communities within it, underneath it, kind of all grouped and live together. We have a lot of sexual orientations. We have a lot of gender identities. We have a lot of individuality. For so long, we've gained acceptance of that 6-color rainbow flag. And that has served us so well. And if you don't know the history, the original flag had 8 colors. And pink and turquoise stopped being used because pink and turquoise were really expensive and hard to get and made the flags harder to make. So they were cut just for purely economic purposes. That 6-color rainbow flag has now become kind of the de facto default for the community. And this is what you'll often see in marketing campaigns, in those pride marketing campaigns. Slap a rainbow on it, it'll be fine. Over time, you've seen that this has evolved and changed. And so several years ago in Philadelphia, the people added the black and the brown stripe to recognize the reality that black and brown people, people of color, are a part of the LGBTQ community and needed to have that visibility to be named and mentioned and included in a part of it. And that has further evolved into what you see on the screen now, the progress flag that takes the black and the brown stripes and adds the transgender colors of the white and the pink and the blue to once again call out and make special recognition for a segment of the community that has often also been marginalized, pushed to the side, have their needs set, and often faces a lot of disparities that don't exist for other portions of the community. So one of the commonly accepted flags right now has been this progress flag that does have specific mentions and callouts for the transgender community and for people of color. But again, we have a lot of sexual orientations and gender identities. No one person is LGBTQ. We are an amazing combination. And so if that's true, if that's possible, lean into the nuances and the realities that exist within this big, broad, diverse community. And that means embracing these different sexual orientations and gender identities that have their own particular needs, their own particular desires, their own particular community and values and language, and yes, their own particular flags. I put up all these flags. I'm not going to explain all of them to you. You can Google that for yourself. But it is a shorthand to say that you can lean into the particularities that exist for a person or for the community and have them represent their real, true, authentic self, not just an amalgamated version. And so you can see the transgender flag kind of there in the middle, the lower left, with the blue and the pink and the white. Just above that, the bisexual flag with bold pink and purple and blue. Up in the upper right corner, the gold background with the purple circle on it, representing the intersex community. If you've ever seen LGBTI, intersex is a part of that community. We can represent the full breadth of the community because we have people that do live into these identities. And of course, there's really strong overlap with our with race, with ethnicity, with gender, with ability, with class, with all those things, because the LGBTQ community overlaps with every other community. And that full diversity of the LGBTQ community absolutely includes people of color, includes transgender people, as that progress flag is represented, includes women, includes people with disabilities. And so think about who your spokespeople are. Think about who's speaking up for the company or for the community, both in things like advertising. The examples you see on your screen all come from advertising that can reflect the fuller diversity of the community, and who's representing the company in and of itself. And that may be looking through your own employee resource group to ask who's not being represented in this group as well. And so that reflection makes a huge difference. These are some of the ads that have done it over the course of the past year, 2 years. That Pantene Home for the Holidays ad featuring the transgender chorus of Los Angeles, a real chorus with real people, and showing them singing and also going home. That Zola ad that featured 2 brides that got Hallmark Channel in such hot water and also got a lot of great media attention for Zola. And then Super Bowl ads, things like TurboTax, using a play on the ballroom scene, using ballroom leaders like Isis King and Trace Lizette, using a pop star who's very open about his sexuality, Lil Nas X, selling Doritos, or Lily Singh, the comedian and late night talk show host, being a part of Oil of Olay. And Nal DeMarco, the model who's deaf, who you see here with sign language painted on his body, who can also advocate for the LGBTQ community, for disability community, and representing the places that he gets hired to speak for. These are ways that we lean into that full diversity, recognizing, again, the intersectionality of identity is going to have different impact on how people are able to live their lives out in public, and how helpful or harmful laws are going to disproportionately fall on different portions of the community. So what are some ways that you can watch and be careful for this? One really strong recommendation I have, not just for Pride, but all year long, is to partner with an LGBTQ organization and find ways to promote it and to give back to that organization. GLAAD has a lot of corporate partners. Maybe you are a corporate partner. If you'd like to be one, you can chat with me about that. This is not just about partnering with GLAAD, though. My recommendation is to find the organizations that are going to match where you are geographically, to find the organizations that match your company's values, and organizations that can also help to lean into that full diversity of the LGBTQ community, which means representation for people of color, women, transgender people, people with disabilities, so on and so forth. Giving you some GLAAD examples because we've had some really great partners. It can be things like a special product that a portion of your proceeds will go to the organization. It can be offering your space for meetings and gatherings and events when we get to have meetings and gatherings and events again in person. It sometimes means taking direction from that organization of what is going to be the most helpful. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's volunteer power, sometimes it's amplification, sometimes it's in-kind donations like spaces or product or whatever. Sometimes it's helping to offer with a service so that this organization can focus on their core mission and not worry about the business. Think about how you partner with those organizations, because they are going to be the ones that can best tell you the work they're doing on the ground and where and how your company can show up to be the most helpful. And thankfully, there are organizations for every single interest area out there. First off, there are LGBT centers in many cities and communities around the country. And they are meeting local needs, providing a gathering space, sometimes offering support services, sometimes offering life-giving services or social services that can help with organizations. Centerlink is the national network of LGBT centers and can help you connect with the one in your own area. If you look at this slides up here, I'm giving you a sampler of all the different interest areas. Some of them are professional, things like health professionals, people that work in tech or in STEM or real estate or the travel industry. Some are for particular populations. SAGE is an organization that focuses on LGBTQ elders and helping them to live their full lives in their senior years. Others are interest areas, right? A very queer book club, people that love books and reading. Sports organizations like hockey associations and the Gay Softball World Series and Outriders. Automotive Pride for people that have interest in cars and are LGBTQ. And things like Politics and Pints, where people can chat about the politics of the day. There are interests areas for every LGBTQ organization, because sometimes people want to do the thing they love with a community that they identify with. And you can also be a partner to these organizations, especially if your business overlaps with the interest area of one or more of these organizations. So think about that and do some research on what exists within your local community, what exists within your state, and what exists in your interest area. I also want to add that in your particular state, nearly every state has an LGBTQ equality organization. This is going to be the organization that is probably tracking and following what is happening within your state, within the legislature, within law, within community and culture. It is worthwhile to build a relationship with that organization because they know what is happening. Breaking news, legislative news. They can also help you to direct your energy and attention and efforts to the places where it can have the most impact. If you need help getting connected with these organizations, finding out what's the right organization for you, don't hesitate to contact me or those of us at GLAAD and the GLAAD Media Institute. We would love to help set you up and partner, because we know that a rising tide lifts all boats. And us helping these organizations helps, again, to advance acceptance, which leads to equality, which leads to legal protections and people being able to live their full, authentic lives. So let's talk about a couple other opportunities. I've mentioned Beyond Pride a lot. And one thing I want to talk about just calendar-wise, there's a lot of LGBTQ holidays that exist outside of Pride. Oftentimes, so much Pride attention pops up that the month of June is absolutely saturated. People have a hard time paying attention because there's so much attention on Pride stuff that it is easy to miss. We've been recommending to partners that work with GLAAD to perhaps move some of their LGBTQ campaigns outside of the month of June. There's a couple of reasons for this. One, June is Pride in some major cities in the United States and around the world. Other cities have moved them to other times of year, sometimes because it connects with something that is more historic to the local community, sometimes because June is just really hot in these southern states, and it is much easier to do this in October and hold a parade when it's not quite so hot outside. But again, beyond Pride, you can celebrate things like the Transgender Day of Visibility, International Asexuality Day, National Day of Silence, the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Transphobia, Bi Week, LGBTQ History Month, National Coming Out Day, Spirit Day, Intersex Awareness Day, Trans Awareness Week, World AIDS Day. These are only a few of the LGBTQ commemorative days and holidays that your company can be connected with and be involved with. And a lot of these particular campaign days are driven by organizations. GLAAD's been the driver behind Spirit Day since 2010. And you see Sterling K. Brown there wearing a Spirit Day mask and a t-shirt. We are the ones that reach out to ask if people will go purple on the third Thursday in October in support of LGBTQ youth and to oppose bullying. And so we ask you, your company, will your logo go purple? Will your employees wear purple? Will people change their profile photos purple? Are there commemorative things to do? This is kind of a different day than Pride, but it's a great day for energy and involvement and engagement and as a public campaign. You can do similar work for any of these other days, especially in partnership with an organization. So look at the calendar and see if there are ways and places that your organization can save a little bit of your time and energy and attention and budget to help people understand that LGBTQ people exist outside of the month of June. So I'm going to end this workshop with a couple, what I'm calling backing up marketing, but there are also pitfalls to watch for. One of the big things that happens is that a lot of work gets put in the PR and in the marketing. And we have to make sure that your product features, that your interactions, that the customer service that you have can back up a cool, snazzy marketing campaign. GLAAD has released a report earlier this year called the Social Media Safety Index. This is looking at the tech community, the online social media platforms. And we specifically target the big five, but we give overarching recommendations that make sense for most tech platforms out there. And so it is well worth reading because the reality is LGBTQ people and other marginalized groups are not safe on social media platforms. They continue to face harassment. They continue to be deplatformed, to be reported as false profiles and have their content taken down. And we need to find ways to make these social media platforms safer. And we give recommendations for how the social media platforms and tech companies can enforce content to make sure people are not being harassed, make sure people are not being falsely reported as fake profiles. This is the essential work that has to be done so that your ads or marketing campaigns can actually be effective. People finding that your product does not work or is not inclusive or that your customer service is bad is going to ruin any of the good marketing campaigns that you do. So look at things, look at your interactions, look at what your customers have to go through, look at the surveys and the questions that are being asked to help set up profiles. These are all things to look at to make sure that your campaign saying that you're a welcoming, inclusive place is actually true. I also want to turn and look at that allyship with the LGBTQ community as a way of backing up marketing. The other thing to look at is to make sure that your company has LGBTQ inclusive and protective policies and culture. Trainings like this are helpful. A review of your HR policies are helpful. A look at what is covered in your insurance and not covered in your insurance is really helpful. And I know there's other workshops at this conference that are going to go much more in depth of that, so I just want to make sure that I say that. And that your company culture is also important. If it's a hostile place to work, then it's going to be really hard for LGBTQ people to see you as an ally to the community if people don't feel safe at work. It's also important that your leadership is demonstrating respect for LGBTQ clients and employees and the community. At GLAD, we have seen many leaders, heads of companies, CEOs, say something that is anti-LGBTQ and not understand the backlash that happens against their company, that not understand the fact that the buying power of the LGBTQ community exists is going to be for companies that want to help and want to support us. And comments that are being said in private, on social media, in off-the-cuff comments in panels and workshops can have a major, major impact on how you are viewed by the LGBTQ community. And then lastly, this is really important, your corporate donations. I've talked already about partnering with nonprofit LGBTQ organizations. It is also very, very important that you examine what political causes you are supporting and which politicians you're supporting. Some companies have wanted to make donations, just to hedge bets for both sides. But I've seen several companies come under fire when clearly anti-LGBTQ political leaders are getting donations from companies that hold themselves up as the allies to the LGBTQ community. And reporters will go into those public filings to find what companies are funding what politicians who are trying to pass laws that are harming the community. And people will ask, why are we patronizing, supporting, seeing this company as an ally when they are funding politicians that want to take us backward? This is a really difficult ask, but I have to include it in here because your reputation with the community really, really does rest on you being seen as authentically an ally in every aspect of your company's work. And these are some things to do some self-examination. And I say this because, as I said, the community is savvy. We have been through a lot. We have seen fair weather support come and go over time. And so backing up marketing gets hard when leaders and companies are not stepping up. It can be done through political donations, which can ruin all that goodwill. It can also be done through silence. And I'm putting up on the screen right now some tweets that came up earlier this year. And you see the dates on them all from April. This was in the midst of when so many states were introducing anti-transgender legislation. Those bills that were going to harm transgender students that want to participate in sports. The bills that were going to ban doctors from treating transgender youth. And you see leaders there asking, why is nobody speaking up when the transgender community is under attack? Chase Strangio is a lawyer with the ACLU and leading a lot of these, the legal effort opposing these bills that did become laws. And he says exactly 0 large corporations have done what we need to stop these anti-trans bills. 0. Please remember that. Come Pride. You see Nico Lang and Tegan and Sarah. Nico Lang's a reporter. Tegan and Sarah, the musicians. Also noticing the silence that exists when these laws pop up and how and when you can speak out, which is why backing up marketing is so incredibly important. I'm going to end with showing that map again of the anti-LGBTQ bills that are being introduced in states in 2021. If you show up during Pride Month, we will expect you to speak up for us when the LGBTQ community is under attack. I don't like how red this map is, and I hope that you don't like how red or even pink this map is. And I hope that you're looking at the states where you live, where your company works, where you've got employees, and start to think of ways that you can use that company influence to oppose anti-LGBTQ bills, anti-transgender bills, find ways to make the case that this is morally wrong and that it's going to hurt your company's business, that it's going to hurt your bottom line, that it's going to hurt the economic activity in the state by refusing medical care for LGBTQ people, or by chasing parents of transgender kids out of the state because they want to seek proper treatment for their children. This is an important place in which to speak up, and not just to avoid the bad PR of those tweets that I showed a couple minutes ago, but also to recognize that you want your company to be a champion of equity and diversity and inclusion for the LGBTQ community. And I want to make the case that we can only do that when the communities in which we live and the states in which we live also have protections that will allow people to live their full, authentic lives, which is why we need you speaking up. I'll make my last case. I am an LGBTQ advocate. I've been for many years. I work for an LGBTQ organization. People expect that I am going to be promoting protections for the LGBTQ community. I'm going to be opposing these anti-LGBTQ laws. They're tired and used to hearing from me. I think right now businesses and corporations have a bigger voice and a bigger platform than all of us advocacy organizations, which is why we need you speaking up for the community. And when that you are talking to people in state legislatures or governors or elected leaders about the relationship that your company has with the state, include this in your conversations, in your negotiations. Make sure your elected leaders know where you stand as well, just as much as you are trying to reassure us, the LGBTQ community, where you stand. You have powerful voices, and your companies can amplify the voices of all these individual advocates and activists, some of which are probably your coworkers or yourself, and to help bring that in front of the elected leaders that have the power to pass laws that can either protect the community or harm the community. Push them toward protecting the community. And you're not just having to do it alone. GLAAD is a resource. And I hope that if you heard something that interests you or that you would like follow-up, that you would please follow up with us at GLAAD. I'm putting my own contact information up there. You can always email me at rmurray@glaad.org. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram on In Lay Terms. You can also follow GLAAD and find out the many, many things that we're doing. GLAAD is operating in several different areas. We are in Hollywood right now. We're reading scripts. We're helping advise casting. We're helping with marketing and rollout of film and television. We're releasing reports on HIV stigma, on representation in film and television, on how non-LGBTQ Americans feel about the LGBTQ community. We're responding with news and rapid response to these bills that are popping up, to incidents of hate crimes. We are working in Spanish language media with the Latinx community, with communities of color and queer Black voices to help amplify them. We're using celebrities to help get our message out to a bigger and wider audience, and we can help you get these messages of welcome and inclusion and equality and acceptance out to a bigger, wider audience. Been working with corporations now through the GLAAD Media Institute for a few years, and we have seen tremendous movement, both internally for the company and for the wider community. And you can help advance GLAAD's work and our mission. And I would welcome a follow-up conversation with you anytime during this conference or afterward to discuss how to be able to do that together. And I will loop in one of my brilliant colleagues. I put their social media here because I think they are worthwhile following. These are leaders of our organization. They are thought leaders. They are brilliant, leading transgender representation in film and television and the news, working with those communities of color, with Latinx voices, with Spanish language media, in entertainment, in celebrity. We've got folks that have expertise in so many different areas, and we're very excited to work with you and help you. So thank you so much for spending the last 50 minutes with me. I am very appreciative of the work that you do to help make your companies more welcome and more inclusive. And I hope that GLAAD can be a part of making both your company, your community, your state, our nation, and our world a place where everyone can live the life they love. Thanks so much. Have a great conference. Bye.